We're going to give maybe 10 more seconds to just let people get in. I know there's the shifting between sessions, but we want to dive in. So welcome and thank you all so much for being here today. Let me give it another like 5 seconds. Awesome. Cool. Well, hello and welcome. It's my pleasure I'm Rhie Azzam-Morris. I'm going to be moderating. I'm a former federal consultant in racial equity and youth homelessness and a formerly homeless young person. I'm very excited to be here today for this session. It is my pleasure to introduce today's presentation on a critical but often overlooked aspect of youth homelessness, the powerful bond between young people experiencing housing instability and their animal companions. Before we dive into research, I want to share my own story, if that's okay. Years ago, I was hitchhiking across the country when a Rainbow Gathering kitchen bus picked me up. If you don't know what that is, just ask. I can explain in the chat. On that bus, there were 6 kids and 9 dogs, including a litter of 4 2-month-old puppies. One of those puppies literally jumped in my lap the moment I got on that bus and peed on me, and everyone laughed and joked that he had claimed me, and they were right. When I left that bus, Danny came with me. For many of us, our pets are beloved family members, but for young people facing homelessness, these relationships take on even greater significance. Their pets often represent their most stable emotional connection, a source of unconditional love, and a reason to keep moving forward during incredibly difficult circumstances. Yet our current housing systems frequently force these young people to make an impossible choice, seek shelter and services, or stay with their pet. This presentation today is examining this painful dilemma and proposing practical solutions. Through participatory action research, through participatory action research that centered the voices and lived experiences of unhoused youth in the Denver metro area, our presenters today have identified concrete strategies to transform housing systems to accommodate these vital human-animal bonds. Their findings highlight several key areas for change that they're going to go into, so I'm not even going to go into. And we want to name, like, this work really illustrates how changes at the policy level and in public perception and in service provision can create more humane and effective systems that recognize the importance of pets in the lives of young people experiencing homelessness. Danny became my constant companion and trained up as a road dog. He saved my life twice from people who picked us up and were trying to harm me. And when I got stuck in Amarillo, unable to hitchhike a ride back to Austin, I smuggled him onto a Greyhound bus to get him home. But when I was finally connected to housing opportunities, breed restrictions kept me from being able to find a place where we could stay together. And I faced that impossible choice. And I ended up sending Danny to live with my cousin and her family. She had a huge house, backyard, kids. It was great. And really, he lived a better life than I did in the ensuing years. But I had to give up my best friend so that we could each find stability. What many people don't understand is that when you're unhoused with a pet, that animal always comes first. Food for Danny was always my priority before feeding myself. We protect our family out there. Ironically, our animals are often treated by our own choice. The bond is that strong and that sacred. I invite you to engage fully with this interactive presentation as it offers valuable insights for anyone working to address youth homelessness in a truly holistic and compassionate way. Without further delay, I would love to introduce Sloane Hawes, Sloane Hawes, Chief Research and Development of C.A.R.E, Companions and Animals for Equity, and Laura Coddington, a PhD student and graduate research assistant at the University of Denver. Thank you all for being here.
All right. We'll get the show on the road here. Laura, you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Coddington, she, her pronouns. As Rhie said, I'm a doctoral student at the University of Denver studying social work. My area of research and interest is in housing. I do research with the Center for Housing and Homelessness Research at University of Denver. Most of my work has been focused around guaranteed basic income, universal basic income, particularly for unhoused folks. But my interests lie passionately in subsidized housing, access to housing, fair housing, that kind of stuff, and abolitionist housing practices. In addition to that, I am a dog mom, I suppose I would say. My wife and I have 5 special needs dogs, as well as 1 ancient cat who kind of rules the roost. Sloane?
And hey, y'all. My name is Sloane Hawes, pronouns she, her, and I am the Chief of Research and Development at Companions and Animals for Reform and Equity, or C.A.R.E. We are a BIPOC-led national organization, and my role is supporting our participatory research activities, both internally to inform the programming that C.A.R.E offers, and then externally through partnerships like what we've got going on with Laura and the University of Denver team. I identify as a white cisgender woman. I am the parent and caregiver of 2 human puppies, 2 dogs, and 6 chickens. And I have lived experience of housing instability, as well as I'm a volunteer housing authority commissioner in my local community.
Sloan, can I hop in because I realized I forgot my positionality and whatnot. Prior to my doctoral program, I worked at the Housing Authority of the City of Aurora in Denver, in Aurora, Colorado, for almost 10 years in multiple capacities, from case manager up to kind of middle management. So I have a lot of experience working directly with this population. However, I'm a white cisgender woman who has not experienced housing instability. Um, and so that places me in a bit of a place of privilege, but I think that's
Yeah,
no human children.
and I wanted to acknowledge, the research we're going to share with y'all was part of the Participatory Action Research Project. The young people and the housing providers who participated in that process with us are not present to present due to time limitations and capacity limitations. But the findings and what we're going to share with y'all, we have shared with them and have gotten their input. So just noting that. All right. Just a little bit about the research team. Of course, Laura and I are just 2 of the mighty folks that have contributed to this effort. Our other principal investigator on the project is Erin Flynn, who's also with the Graduate School of Social Work at the University of Denver. Our other co-investigator is Dr. Kimberly Bender at the Graduate School of Social Work at University of Denver. Our amazing research assistant, Avery Rhie, a consultant, Dr. Jennifer Wilson, who's at the Center for Housing and Homelessness Research at University of Denver. And then we'll talk a little bit about our partners, both young people and housing providers. Our agenda today is just go over a few things, some of the exploratory, or I should say, kind of early, hot off the press type findings. We're still in data analysis on this project, but we wanted to get this data into y'all's hands as soon as humanly possible. So we're going to talk a little bit about the perspectives on barriers and facilitators to navigating the housing system for unhoused young folks and their pets. We also gathered information about housing providers' perspectives on these issues. We're going to share a little bit about that. And then really the important part is to get y'all into action. So we've got a couple suggestions coming out of the focus groups and the interview data around action items that each of y'all can put into play to transform the housing system in your own communities. And I think, I can't remember if Rhie said this, but we're happy to take questions as we go. But we're also going to take questions at the end. So Rhie, if you'll help us just elevate anything we want to address in real time, or we can also just kind of field questions at the end, whatever folks are most comfortable with.
Absolutely. I put it in the chat, I'm chat warrior-ing, and if you are in Whova, you can also submit questions to the Q&A section. And I'm kind of chat warrior today, so I will be on top of it.
Super. All right, we are going to kick off with a quick interactive activity. I know many of y'all have participated already, but for folks who haven't had a chance, if you will hop into Whova, if you're not there right now, and participate in our word cloud activity, we wanted to hear from each of y'all what word or words come to mind when you think of unhoused young people and pets. Just rapid, what comes to mind? We'll give y'all like 2 minutes, and then we'll share what we have so far.
All right, it looks like folks are about done. I haven't seen the numbers change at all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, unfortunately, it's not showing the entire all the answers that we have, it looks like, because 56 folks answered, and I feel like there are more to that. Um, so I'm not quite sure what to do about that. Rhie, any insight? I thought that this fixed it.
Let me see. But you might have to go back and create it again.
Okay, let me stop sharing real quick.
Laura, if it's all right with you, I'll just hop in, Huba. Sorry, y'all, this will be the less polished version of this, but does this work for
Yeah,
seeing
that
what we've got?
works. Yeah, I would just go ahead and do that.
All right, so apologies, y'all. This is really small down on this bottom right corner. We will find a way to share this and post it to our session here at the end. But just wanted to call out kind of what we're hearing and seeing in the word cloud. So we've got the biggest words being the ones that have been populated most frequently. We've got family, we've got sad, we've got bonded, safety, stress, vulnerable, needing, opportunity, and my kid. And I'm going to transition back over here to Laura to give some background on the research project we did.
Yeah, so gosh, now at this point, 3 years ago, Erin Flynn, my co-PI on this project, came to me after one of our first research classes in qualitative research and asked if we could expand on a project that I had done just for a demonstration on unhoused youth and their pets. And so she had found a funding stream through C.A.R.E, the Human Animal Behavioral Research Institute, or Human Animal Bond Research Institute, sorry. And we applied for that grant and we were funded for it. Some background on our project is that we are a participatory project. We're using qualitative research, so primarily interview based. We conducted 3 focus groups with young people throughout the Denver metro area, one in Boulder, one in Colorado Springs, and then one in Denver. And each of these meetings had between 5 and 15 young people who showed up. And all of them had young people who showed up with their pets, which was really awesome to have in our group. We ended up having just really deep, wonderful conversations about the experiences that these young people had had, and really were able to delve into how they've experienced life on the streets, life with their pets, their experiences with shelters, their experiences with housing. And they gave us just the most expansive, deep information that we could get about this. Um, so yeah, do you want to go on to the next slide? Oh, and so I thought that slide was just about young people. I apologize. We also included 20 housing service providers in the Denver metro area as well, from case managers up to administrators to folks who are generally considered experts in the field throughout Colorado. And we had them participate in hour-long interviews with us, hour and a half, and also gained a lot of information from them.
Yeah, and I just want to add a little bit of context for the broader national landscape, right? So a few numbers in case folks aren't familiar with the unhoused young people landscape. The stats show about 4.2 million young people in the US are experiencing housing insecurity, and about 23% of those folks have pets. And, you know, I think most of us on the ground who have looked at these data like understand and believe that that's quite an undercount, but this is what the data shows so far. Part of the kind of scientific basis for exploring this, of course, is recognizing that pets are a critical asset for any unhoused folk, but particularly for young people. And so we'll talk about that as we go along. and that they also experience a number of challenges to accessing services as well as their permanent housing. So this is just what Laura went over already. These are the objectives for the project. These will be on our slides. We'll upload later if anybody wants to reference later. Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about the Kerman framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if folks at all are familiar with this Kerman article utilizing the One Health model for um, a breadth of audience of folks experiencing homelessness. So they developed a system that is actually on the next page that basically makes recommendations on how to work with folks throughout the system who have pets. So, so suggestions at the policy, public, and service level that we use to determine the questions that we would ask folks in our project. Kerman, this is all data informed based on their interviews with folks with lived experience. And so I'm not sure if folks can see this, but I'll go through and I'll read some of the big ones. I don't want to read all of them because I don't want to take up our time with that. But one of the main ones is increasing the supply of pet-friendly emergency shelters so that a minimum of 10% of emergency shelter beds are accessible to people with pets. That low barrier emergency shelters explicitly include pet access requirements, removal of no pet policies in rental markets, limit on security deposits for people with pets, a widespread implementation of housing first, and inclusion of veterinary medicine for unhoused folks. On the public level, really educating folks to dispel any myths associated with pet ownership and homelessness. Like we all know what folks say about unhoused folks when they have pets on the street. It's pretty awful. And then to develop interventions to destigmatize panhandling so that we continue to dispel those myths. And then there are shared actions for all service providers, connecting folks to services that are accessible to pet owners, including veterinary care, which we'll talk later about as well. Veterinary care is one of the most significant things that our young people talked about accessing, ensuring that there is follow-up care when folks lose their pets, that, they really advocate for their clients who have pets. And then for specific housing providers, harm reduction strategies with pets, especially about tobacco smoke. That's kind of an interesting one that also brought forth a lot of conversation, and then provision of ESA letters. So these are the partners that we worked with and developed our participatory action from. We were able to pull in a group of young people from the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative who are part of their youth advocacy committee, and they really informed our questions and the way that we designed our survey. The way that we are working this is kind of in thirds as far as the participatory aspect, just to acknowledge the length of the survey time as well as the transient nature of these young folks. Our first round was in developing the research project. We had a one-day just kind of shotgun planning session, as well as a couple follow-up groups. Our next round will be, once we're done with our level of analysis, our rapid analysis, we'll get together with more stakeholders, more young people especially, and go through what we found and see what their, if that aligns with what they believe. And then our third round will be in dissemination of information and including them in that process. And so we worked with some of the major players in the Denver metro area, Urban Peak, which is our largest youth shelter in Denver, Together, which is a youth shelter and housing program in Boulder, We Fortify, which is a tiny home village down in Colorado Springs that houses young people. If you get a chance, you should go check out their website. It's absolutely gorgeous and such a cool program. Movement 5280 that works with unhoused young folks. It's more of a program than a shelter. And then C.A.R.E, who funds us. So they're very important as well.
Right, and I think Laura, you went over some of this, and again, most of this is just for y'all to reference back later if you want to. But again, like the participatory approach was undergirded by the Youth Advisory Leadership Council during that design phase. For those who care, it was approved by the University of Denver Institutional Review Board. And the official analysis process we've used and the approach was a phenomenological qualitative approach, which really just means we're leaning hard into lived experience and we're checking our assumptions and our paradigms as researchers and really following the lead of what the participants themselves say. And so, as Laura said, we conducted focus groups with young people, so that's a group setting. We did individual interviews with the housing providers, and we use a process called rapid analysis. And for the data geeks out there, if you haven't heard of this approach, I just could not say enough great things about it after working on it with the University of Denver team. It's really a way to get data quickly into your hands for practical, actionable solutions. And I think, somebody who loves qualitative research, I love it even more now that I have this tool about rapid analysis. So if anybody wants to kind of have a side chat about rapid analysis and what a game changer it has been for us as a research team trying to get stuff into hands for action, I love this approach. So throwing that out there.
We have a wealth of information about it too, some really great articles that really outline how to do it easily. So we're happy to share those as well.
So I'm going to interrupt you guys. There's not a question in the chat, but I have a question, which is because I've done participatory action research with youth before in Austin, and I'm curious, when you engaged these young folks, like how did you manage compensation? Was there compensation at all? And then how did you navigate, are any of the young...
Oh, I lost you, Rhie. Slow, could you hear Rhie? Okay.
Are we better now?
Yeah, you're better. I missed after compensation.
So the only other question is, because it was participatory action, if you publish a white paper or publish anything, will the young people also have authorship credit?
Those are really great questions. Thank you. And yes, we did. We actually did a lot of intentional work around compensation for all of our participants. For the YALC folks and the folks who helped us with the original project design, we went to MDHI and we said, hey, we're doing this. This is what we are thinking is a fair price to pay the young people. I think it was $20 an hour, $22 an hour. And they came back and they said, well, actually, we pay our young people $25 to $27 an hour for their expertise. And so we were able to go through and change all of our work so that we were able to compensate them fairly for their time. So yes, we did. And any participant was actually compensated with $20 an hour for their time in our focus groups.
Awesome.
And then, yes, absolutely. We absolutely plan on including voices in our papers, in our white papers, in our gray papers, and in any presentations that we can possibly do.
All right, so for the sake of time, we're just going to motor through this next little section so we can get y'all to the results. Again, some of this we've covered already around where the information was collected and who it was collected from. We do have detailed demographics if anybody wants to take a look at that. Laura, is there anything specific you want to call out about the demographics of the participants?
No, I don't think so. I just think that they match the general demographics that we see between the participants in the study and the service providers. And I just want to note that I think the majority of the pictures on this are actual folks who gave us permission to share their pictures with their pets and animals. So these are all animals who we got to meet throughout the process and their owners. So as we said, we're still conducting analysis. We're about halfway through the process. Rapid analysis is a quick process, but it's still not, instant. So these are the results that we're hearing from the young people that we worked with. And we did ask for feedback for them as we go through this, just to ensure that we're, sharing their words with the most integrity and most completeness. And so in their words, things that we found were that pets are a reason for them to keep going, that they're a reason for them to wake up in the morning, for them to keep busy, that getting ESA letters is one of the most challenging aspects unless an agency has its own therapist or social worker, and getting legitimate ESA letters, not the ones from online that are really predatory and charge a lot of money for them. That they experience a lot of stigma for having a pet and being unhoused. that they hear the usual, you need to get rid of your pet, you need to, you're abusing your pet, yada, 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 when the reality is that, they've gone hungry so that they could take care of their pet. One young person shared with us that she had no food one day and she found a can of chicken in her house and she ended up giving it to her cat before she ate. So, that this is their reality. Finding pet resources is one of the biggest challenges as well, especially around veterinary care. There are some programs in the Denver metro area that are really, really helpful that provide these services, but are really hard to get into. Um, and that finding food for specialized pet diets is really difficult. There's access to the pet pantry in Denver, but if your pet, like all of my pets do, have special dietary needs, it can be a challenge and really, really expensive to get food for them. Pet-friendly shelters would encourage them to seek more services and get off the streets. A lot of them had issues where they didn't have anyone to watch their pet when they would go meet with their case manager or whatnot, where pets were not allowed inside. The most impactful Kerman scale item that we'd asked them was pet-friendly shelters. And the least impactful Kerman scale item is smoking education. I think that a lot of them found that to be pretty outside their interests and levels of importance. And so these are just some of the most impactful quotes that we've gathered from the young folks. Feel free to read along, but I'll share them as well. But my pet made me get through things that I didn't think would be possible. When I was younger, I didn't think I'd make it to 18. And when I was 18, I didn't think I was going to make it to 19. And now I know I'm going to make it to 20. And then another young person shared this about kind of parallel processes with herself and her pet, that I'm not sure if this is a skill, but I noticed changes in her and the way she interacts with people when I have visitors. And the fact that I am also making some of those changes. And I'm wondering if she's reflecting my changes or I'm reflecting hers. And then finally, all I have is my dog. And quite honestly, yeah, I agree with people who say, if it wasn't for some of our animals, we wouldn't be here. I'd probably be behind bars or doing crazy crap. I keep my dog as someone who can always help me remember to reel me back in.
So I'm going to share some of what we heard from our housing provider participants. So again, these were one-on-one interviews that we had with folks throughout the area providing services for unhoused young people and or their pets. And so some of the high-level things that came out of those interviews included, we asked about their definition for success in working with this population. They talked about really keeping people with their pets, and in particular, having a very person-centered approach around that, which is directly from that Kerman framework. This idea that each person's definition of success might vary quite a bit, kind of what it's going to take to get that person or support that person in keeping their pet might be quite different, but that the goal is to maintain that bond, maintain that relationship. They talked a lot about, like, we can't do this work alone. And this importance of collaboration and partnerships, and that like one provider can't be everything to everybody, and so building those relationships and really thinking about it as a system to protect unhoused young people and pets, how critical that really is. They talked about the bigger picture about where folks are going after they're kind of achieving higher levels of stability, and really the biggest barrier for that being the additional fees for pets and housing and the need for pet inclusive transportation. So those are two of the broader big and much larger kind of systemic issues that the providers were running into. They talked about the need to shift the narrative from, and this might feel like semantics, so I'll kind of go through this in maybe in tedious detail, but like we need to shift from blaming the individual and saying like these young people are choosing their pet over their house, to there's a need for a pet inclusive housing system. So we need to be addressing the structural issues here. This is a specific example of how like the social work framework and research can be really helpful, especially when we're talking about housing justice issues, when we're talking about racial justice issues, is this need to shift the paradigm, shift the data we collect, reframe the research to, it's not about the individual problems, the people are not the problem, right? The system is the problem. And so that came up quite organically in the provider interview. So that was exciting and interesting to hear. And then On the Kerman scale, again, we asked participants to rate, what they thought were most impactful, and it aligned a bit with what the young people said, right? So the most impactful for providers was the need for pet-friendly shelters. The least impactful was removing the no pet policies for renters and enforcing laws that prevent discrimination due to pet ownership. I think generally folks just felt like that was not necessary. A few quotes. These are pseudonyms that we assigned to the providers just to protect their identities for their participation. So this provider, Kate, had two standout quotes. They talked about that there's often a line that gets blurred between neglect and poverty when it comes to being unhoused. Sometimes there are just needs that can't be met, not because the person has the intention of not meeting them, but because the financial ability isn't there. Kate also talked about, I think especially online, there's a lot of hate for people who surrender their animals, but then there's also hate for the people who won't surrender their animals. It's like either way, they can't win. Another provider, Dina, had some powerful quotes. So this is just one of them. They talked about, I don't have to understand the relationship, but I can understand the emotions underlying it, of feeling connected to someone or something and feeling a bond. And as long as that's there, then I can get with you on that. I can empathize with you on that. So I think for all of our residents, that's what we really try and do, is empathize, not necessarily on the type of pet, depending on what they're trying to bring in, but just the relationship that they built with that animal. And finally, one of our providers, Sally, had two quotes we wanted to share with you. They talked about the importance of pets for these young folks that they work with. They said, being on the streets and in shelters can be isolating. Having a pet is such an important thing that still brings so much comfort and support to people, especially young people who are just trying to figure out their lives like we all are. But it's especially difficult at that age. And I think having a pet can kind of give you a sense of home. The last quote we'll share was also from Sally. They said, I think especially when it comes to pets, nobody knows your pet better than yourself. So I can't just look at your dog and assume that I know what's best for them. You've had this pet for however long, for years, and you know them. You're best friends, and you know what's normal for them and what's not normal.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Rhie.
It's Rhie. Hey, I'm still keep an eye on chat. I do want to name, we have about 8 minutes left. I want to say just one thing super quickly, if I can, to the quotes that you just said that I just wanted to add in there. So part of my work is to do trauma-informed care training. And I want to note for young people, especially, having that companionship when getting housed for the first time is so, so important, because when a young person is housed for the first time, a lot of trauma will resurface, and having that emotional connection makes a huge difference in their ability to kind of navigate through a more successful outcome. And I think people underestimate the power of that real relationship that you have, right? Like to your point, young folks will go, I will stay out in the freezing cold if the emergency shelter won't let my dog in, but it also like really does psychologically, and there's another word for it where it's like affects the brain. It really is a helpful thing, and it's so important that our policies reflect that need.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we'll wrap up here just with some of the takeaways. Laura, do you want to run through these?
Yeah, sure. So our takeaways so far, and these could change as we go along, but the housing first is important as an intervention, that housing is a right, that pets are a critical development asset for young people, that we want to break, and our participants want to break the cycle of housing insecurity with this next generation, that it's important to move from surviving to thriving, and that it's important to change the system, not the people or the pets. And I also want to point out that most of the service providers that we spoke with were interested and passionate about housing young people with their pets. I think that there's a notion that folks, don't want to, or they say that it's impossible. And I think folks really, really want to, but they just don't have the resources to make that happen.
So yeah, our next steps really are to finalize this analysis. And our goal is to prioritize the practical solutions. So practice recommendations and policy advocacy We've already testified in support of some of the legislation going on in Colorado. We've got House Bill 25-1207 that's in progress right now. And so we've provided some of this data in support of that. Of course, we're doing conference presentations like this one to reach y'all from a practitioner perspective. And then we may also develop some journal articles, reports, or white papers. So as we noted earlier, the participants will be offered co-authorship if they're interested, or if they're interested in presenting as well, the experience with presenting the findings. And so we're going to wrap up with kind of our last little interactive thing and open up for any questions. Again, just asking y'all to step into the Whova platform and participate in our short answer question. Just reflect a little bit. What are some actions, maybe some things that you heard today, or maybe some things that came up for y'all that we didn't say explicitly? What are some actions that you can take to protect unhoused young people and their pets? And while y'all are doing that, I'll just go through these last few slides. We've got references here, yay, references. We do have a website where we're posting updates and sharing resources that get created out of this research. So if you all want to join us we have an Instagram account, the Colorado Sheltering Coalition, and then also this website, not to be confused with the Co-Sheltering Coalition, which is hosted by My Dog is My Home, but this is co as in Colorado Sheltering Coalition. So join us on those two platforms for updates. I would also encourage y'all, if you're up for it, if you want to continue to be in conversation with C.A.R.E regarding how we're going to put these strategies into action, particularly to advance racial equity. Encourage y'all to scan this QR code and join our Changemakers Circle. It is totally free. We are not going to spam you. It's just it's an email basically with updates and invites to webinars and conversations and actions. And a thank you to our funders, to Rhie and to PetSmart Charities.
So in the chat, there's not a question, but Kira said, I love that participants will have the opportunity to be listed as co-authors or present findings. It's a great way to ensure that they're involved and have resume builders for success. I just wanted to lift that up because yes, I agree.
Yes, absolutely. That's been something that we've said since day one. Kim Bender, who's our faculty sponsor for this project, is just, I mean, she's a powerhouse in participatory action research with youth, and she's been really integral in leading us in how to do that, how to work ethically within these systems with young people and make sure that, you know, they're being fairly compensated, that they are having the opportunity to not just, you know, be a sounding board, but to also get remuneration and acknowledgement for their work and their expertise.
And remember, right, like I think for anyone in this room that they, you know, there's a common saying, those closest to the problem are closest to the solutions. It's so important for young people to have a place to be able to create new outcomes, right? That autonomy and ownership allows such a level of growth, and what y'all are presenting and doing right now, I think is really just so deeply in line with that, of allowing a space for young folks to not only say, here's what the problems are, but also here are the ways to fix that. You know, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, Rhie. I'm at the National Income Housing Coalition, their conference right now. So sorry, doing double duty. But, you know, one of the things that comes up in the research conversations with tenants' rights organizers is like, if you have the wrong information, you're going to get the wrong answer every time, right? And I think this project has been super illuminating in the like, and again, I kind of preaching to the choir in this space, right? But like, we shouldn't be programming outsiders without lived experience, shouldn't be talking about what the solutions are for these problems, right? You need folks who are closest to the issue. As I just thought that standalone quote, like, if you have the wrong information, you're going to get the wrong answer. You know, I love this project. I think it's getting closer to, you know, the right answer, because we're actually asking the folks impacted what they're looking for.
Yes, I'm going to take what you're saying a step further, just if you don't mind, which is if we don't know the right questions to ask, we're never going to get the right answers.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. Like, I think what's amazing about opportunities like what y'all are doing is you're presenting a space for folks to be able to actually say, this is the question we need to ask. Y'all aren't asking the right questions, right? And designing that piece of it. And that's why participatory action research is so valuable and amazing and wonderful. So folks who are here hearing this presentation today, really take that back of like any opportunity you can to engage those closest with the ability to design the actual project. It will
Right.
wildly revolutionize what you find
Yeah,
and learn and how you can move,
absolutely.
you know?
Oh yeah, our process changed significantly between when we first drafted the project and when we actually put it into action after we met with the young people who consulted on this. I saw a question pop up in Whova um, about any examples of successful partnerships between youth housing providers and animal well-being providers. Yes, actually, we had a great experience up in Boulder with Together, which is the youth shelter as well as this beautiful permanent housing program for the young people. And they bring in a veterinary clinic, I believe monthly, as well as food providers for their animals. So I can't remember the name of the program that they work with in Boulder specifically, but it is a Boulder specific program, I believe. Maybe, what is it? Minis? I can't remember, but
Yeah,
yes,
shout out
stuff is
Annie,
happening.
and I think it's Annie and
That's
Millie's place. Yep.
that's
So
the one.
shout
Yeah,
out to Am, and then the other shout out to on the animal well-being is for the Better Together program, which is hosted by the Foothills Animal Shelter. They are
yeah,
filling so many gaps and just doing amazing, amazing work. So we talked to lots of great housing providers, but I
yeah,
think those are two standout programs for this area.
yeah. And Denver Animal Shelter is working to get that off the ground as well. They currently foster pets for folks, so
That's
we're getting there.
amazing. Well, my friends, I just was noting the time, and I know that we're trying to give people time to not have to be back to back to back, and the next session starts in 3 minutes. So, Laura and Sloane, just thank y'all so much for the work you're doing and for being here to present to us. Y'all, if you have other questions, keep them in. You can go to the chat and on this session in your agenda, and I'm gonna just assume that Laura and Sloane can keep an eye out on that and answer them if they get a chance. And thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you all.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, please reach out.
Yep.
Anything we want to talk research, participatory research, supporting young people. We're here to support. So reach out.